Let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return for their life? For the Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay everyone for what has been done. Truly, I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Please be seated. Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering at the hand of the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and on the third day be raised. Poor Peter. He continued to struggle to get it right. He had just delivered one of the greatest testimonies of all time. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And he immediately put his foot back into it big time. I often wonder if Jesus ever clapped his hands to his head and muttered, Father, this whole assignment would be much easier without the disciples. Jesus had granted Peter the power to bind and loose the law. What is the significance behind binding and loosing? How did Jesus use it in his ministry? What did it mean for Peter? The Gospel, according to Matthew, was compiled by an anonymous author during the last third of the 1st century as a manual for Christian teaching. It reminded the people of this new sect that Jesus Christ was both the fulfiller and the fulfillment of God's will as stated in the Old Testament. This gospel was written for a Jewish audience, an audience familiar with the two major works of Jewish religious literature, the Torah and the Mishnah. The Torah is the compilation of the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, in which the law is bound. A reader and believer of the law was bound by indisputable godly authority to hold strictly to the written law. For example, the 10 Commandments. We see this throughout the Gospels when Jesus takes some action forbidden by written Torah. Healing the sick on the Sabbath, touching a dead body, not ritually washing his hands before eating. The Mishnah is the first major written collection of the Jewish oral traditions. It is also known as the Oral Torah. It is the first major work of rabbinic literature and addresses loosing the law, to permit modifying the bound law, but also only by indisputable authority. In the New Testament, this authority was Jesus Christ, who loosed the law out of mercy, compassion, and love, to heal the sick on the Sabbath, to touch a dead body, to resurrect it, to share meals with people of all walks of life, even with dusty hands. Jesus, an indisputable authority, has made Peter an indisputable authority. Peter, in his first enactment of this authority, attempts to both to bind and loose Jesus himself. Peter does not understand that Jesus is bound by God's law. Suffering and death await Jesus in Jerusalem, and it has to happen for Jesus to fulfill God's will and be the fulfillment of God's will. This should not have been such a shock to Peter. Throughout Jesus' ministry, he was clearly not just a lecturer delivering words. His teachings were attached to parables, healings, exorcism, acts of compassion and confrontation, and the message was always clear, that he came to earth to fulfill a mission which could only be accomplished by his death. Now, Jesus began to show this to his disciples with greater intensity. The idyllic time in La La Land, wandering through the countryside, or seated at the feet of their leader and teacher by a gently flowing stream, was over. Peter was so shocked and appalled by the painful vision of Jesus' death as presented before him that he took Jesus aside and said, "God forbid it, Lord." Peter is asking God to loose God from his godly mission, and is also asking God to bind God to his human existence. Let me say that again. Peter is asking God to loose God from his godly mission, and is also asking God to bind God to his human existence. And Jesus, in his humanity, exclaims, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are setting your minds not on divine things, but on human things." Well, of course, Peter set his mind on human things. Peter responded with a moment of dismay, perhaps of anger, and certainly of grief. Haven't we all experienced moments of imminent departure? A child off to kindergarten, a friend moving away due to a job, a loved one about to be taken in death. Don't we all experience communal grief, the aftermath of a mass shooting or a natural disaster? How many of us harbor the effects of, say, the death of Princess Diana, or the Challenger disaster, or 9/11? Each person and each generation holds its own moments when we say, "God forbid it, Lord." We are human, as was Peter, and in our humanity, we trip, we stumble, we fall. We experience doubt and shore ourselves up behind pride. We cling to the earthly because we need to know. We yearn for the physicality of touch. However, we also know that our time on earth is finite. While we are not indisputable authorities, how do we attempt to bind and loosen ourselves to the law? Do we consider our own actions and the consequences of them? Do we loosen ourselves in little things, the same little things that we bind for others? Do we, as disciples, stumble onto Jesus' path? Jesus could not allow himself to trip or to be tripped on the way to the cross, especially by falling over those disciples he is preparing to carry on his work after he is gone. Jesus made it clear that discipleship is not an easy road. Discipleship baggage includes suffering, death, and loss of time. Discipleship baggage includes suffering, grief, and death. Jesus said, "For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their lives for my sake will find it." How then do we balance God's unconditional love for us and the suffering we experience as we disciple our own ways forward? Take up your cross. Keep your eyes on it. Hold the image in your hearts. Picture it when you stumble. Use it to prop yourselves up. Rest against it when you are tired. Soak it in tears when you grieve. And know in your human hearts that Jesus is there for us now